It all started with a feeling, a gut instinct I couldn't shake. The kind you get when the air shifts ever so slightly, and suddenly your ordinary Tuesday has a heartbeat of its own. I remember it vividly because nothing about that day was supposed to be unusual. The sky over Portland was gray. Same as always, low-hanging like it wanted to press down on the tops of buildings. I had left work late, keys jangling in one hand, reusable coffee cup in the other. The bakery on Belmont was closing up, and the buses were running behind as usual. My mind was on dinner, on emails I hadn't answered, on the quiet of my apartment, which lately had felt less like peace and more like a kind of emptiness. Then I saw her. She was sitting on the bench outside the community library, shoulders curled inward, like she was trying to make herself disappear. A duffel bag rested against her feet, and though her head was lowered, something about her posture wasn't quite transient, not aimless. She didn't have that far away, drifting expression most people wore when they were on the edge. No, she looked alert, on guard, watching, and she was young, maybe 19, maybe 21 if you were generous. Way too young to be out here alone, at twilight. I hesitated. This isn't your business, I told myself. But I didn't keep walking. I offered her a sandwich. She refused. I offered to sit, and she didn't stop me. We talked, if you could call it that. Her name was Alyssa. Or so she said. She never asked for help, never looked at me long. She didn't cry, didn't beg, didn't share some dramatic backstory. She simply existed like someone waiting for something to end, and I couldn't stop thinking about her. 3 days passed before I saw her again, still there, same spot, same bag, a little thinner. When the rain started, I brought her an umbrella and a coat. She took the coat. Still no questions, but that was the moment I crossed the line between being a bystander and something more. I couldn't explain it. Something in her felt familiar, though we were strangers in every sense. It was like watching a part of yourself you'd forgotten, cold and alone, waiting for you to notice. So I made her an offer. One night. Just one. A warm meal. A hot shower. A real bed. No strings attached. To my surprise, she accepted. The stranger in my guest room, Alyssa, didn't ask for my Wi-Fi password. Didn't snoop. She took the guest room and locked the door. When I knocked to say dinner was ready, she answered in 5 seconds flat, fully clothed, composed, like she'd never let herself rest. To the table. She barely touched her food. I learned she liked tea, didn't drink coffee, and that she always wore long sleeves, even indoors. You have family? I asked gently. A shrug. Not anymore. What about friends? Another shrug. Don't need any. Her voice wasn't defiant, just matter of fact. I nodded. I didn't press. I gave her space. Days passed. I didn't push her out, and she didn't try to overstay. She cleaned, helped fold laundry, watched the way my hands moved when I spoke, as if memorizing me. But she didn't volunteer much about herself. No stories, no dreams. She had scars on her wrists. I saw them one morning when her sleeve slipped as she reached for the kettle. Neither of us said anything. She reminded me of a cat you rescue from the street. Skittish, wounded, but too proud to let you see her limp. And still, something about her pulled at me, like an old song you don't quite remember but can't stop humming. One decision 3 weeks in, a call from a neighbor prompted the moment that would change everything. I saw a girl coming out of your place, Mrs. Keegan said. She looked rough. Is everything all right? I could have lied, said she was a distant niece, a friend's daughter, but instead, I said, she's staying with me, for now. There was a long pause. You be careful, hon. People aren't always who they seem. I thanked her, but I didn't listen. That night, as Alyssa passed me in the hallway, she stopped. I can go, she said. If people are talking. I stared at her. She looked so calm, so ready to disappear. At a moment's notice, like she'd done it 100 times before. You're not going anywhere, I said. And I meant it. A new identity adapting in adults isn't common, but it isn't impossible either. I had to jump through hoops, convince the court she wasn't being trafficked or coerced, that she wasn't conning me, that I wasn't unstable. We went to counseling. I paid for her to finish her GED, got her a dentist appointment, bought her a coat that fit. She never asked me for anything. That was the strangest part. I had to nudge, guess, improvise my way into caring for her. She acted like kindness came with a trapdoor, and then, after a year, it was done. The paperwork was signed. She was, legally, my daughter. Signs in the silence said there were moments that didn't make sense. She knew how to change a tire, pick a lock, and speak decent French, but claimed she'd never been out of Oregon. She once slipped and called me Ellen. That wasn't my name. She flinched at the sound of certain songs. Once, when we were watching a documentary on cold cases, she turned pale and left the room at the sight of a missing persons flyer from 15 years ago. I found her staring at it in the dark later. She didn't say why. She started locking her bedroom door again. The photography happened on a rainy Sunday afternoon. I was reorganizing old storage boxes, making room for Alyssa's growing pile of thrifted books and clothes. In the bottom of a photo album from 1997, tucked beneath baby pictures of me and my cousins, I found a photo I didn't recognize. A group of kids. A birthday party, maybe. I was in it, definitely younger. Maybe in college. Standing beside a woman I couldn't name, and next to her, a child. A little girl. With the same wide-set gray eyes as Alyssa. I stared at it for a long time. How could she have ended up with this picture? I didn't ask her that night, or the next, but the question burned in me like a fuse. She always smiled politely, but it never touched her eyes. It had been over a year since I adopted Alyssa. Legally, everything was settled. She had a new last name, new health insurance, and her own bedroom in a quiet neighborhood where the worst thing that happened was a misplaced Amazon package. But if you looked beneath the surface, really looked, nothing about her felt settled. She lived in my home like a guest who didn't plan to stay long. She never got too comfortable. She never let herself fully belong. A fractured normal routines helped. Breakfasts together, grocery runs on Sundays. She got a part-time job at a bookstore a few blocks away. Her manager said she was brilliant, quiet, and efficient, a compliment loaded with distance. I tried to treat her like any mother would a daughter. I asked about her day, remembered her favorite snacks, even helped her pick out a dress for a community college orientation. But sometimes she looked at me like I was a stranger, or worse, like I was something she remembered and didn't want. To the red journal one morning, while vacuuming, I accidentally knocked over a stack of notebooks in her room. One tumbled open, a small red leather-bound journal. I swear I only glanced at the page because it had fallen upside down, but what I saw froze me. She doesn't remember me, but I remember her. Every day, every scar, every lie. My chest tightened. I closed the book carefully, set it back, and left the room as if it were on fire. She was writing about me, and apparently, she thought I had forgotten something. Confrontation without accusation. That night, I made pasta. Alyssa ate slowly, eyes down. I waited until we were halfway through before I said, "You know, I sometimes wonder how our paths really crossed. Out of all the places, all the people, why me?" She froze, fork halfway to her mouth. "You were kind," she said simply. "Most people aren't." "Still, feels like fate." She smiled, but her eyes, those guarded, storm gray eyes, didn't change. "It wasn't fate," she said softly. "It was survival." Her nightmarish started waking up screaming. The first time, I ran into her room, heart pounding. She was curled up in the corner, sobbing into her knees, whispering the same word over and over. Briar. It wasn't a name I knew, not a place, not anyone in my life. When I tried to ask, she just shook her head violently, like talking would set her on fire. I called a therapist. Alyssa refused to go, said she wasn't crazy, that she was just remembering things that were better left forgotten, but I didn't believe her anymore. Not completely. A missing person, no one. Miss Seti started doing some digging. No one just appears out of nowhere. Everyone has a footprint, even if it's faint. And if Alyssa had one, it was hidden deeper than most. But one night, I came across a thread on a missing persons forum, someone posting about a girl named Briar Wren who vanished in 2012 from rural Montana. The user who posted it had only one photo, a blurry, low-res image of a child with gray eyes. She looked uncannily like Alyssa. The post had been made 2 years ago. No updates since. My hands trembled as I bookmarked it. I didn't know what scared me more. The possibility that Alyssa was this missing girl, or that she might not be the victim in the story. The woman in the photo returned to the strange photo I'd found tucked in my old album. The child, possibly Alyssa, was standing next to a woman with long dark hair, an unfamiliar smile, and a red floral dress. I showed the photo to my sister on a video call. "Hey, do you recognize this woman?" She leaned closer. "Isn't that she?" Trailed off. "What?" I asked. "I think that's God." "This is weird. That's Evelyn Green. Remember? Dad dated her for like 2 months when we were in high school. She had a daughter. I think she called her Bree or something." My blood ran cold, piecing it together suddenly. Flashes of memory returned, vague but real. A family BBQ. A child hiding behind a chair. A fight my dad had with a woman who left crying. I hadn't thought about Evelyn in decades. She was just one of my father's short-lived flames. But if Briar was her daughter, and Evelyn was somehow connected to my past, then Alyssa's presence in my life wasn't an accident. It was calculated. She had found me. And now she was inside my home, sleeping under my roof. The kindness I thought I'd given a stranger was beginning to feel like the beginning of a story someone else had already written. The breaking point: a week later, I found her on the porch staring into the dark. I sat next to her. "Who's Evelyn Green?" I asked gently. She stiffened, lips parting slightly, but said nothing. I tried again. "I think we both know. You didn't come to me by chance. You came here because of me." She finally turned her face toward me. "She was my mother," Alyssa said, "and she died believing you forgot us." I couldn't speak. The words didn't land, they shattered. I stared at her in stunned silence, and she stood slowly. "Tomorrow," she said, "you'll get the full story. But don't ask me to make it easy." Then she went back inside, leaving me with a heart full of dread and 1,000 questions no mother wants to ask. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at the kitchen table until dawn, staring at the photo of Evelyn Green, and the girl I now knew was Alyssa, or rather, Briar. My coffee went cold. My thoughts never did. What had I done that would bring someone back into my life with so much hidden pain? And why had she waited all this time to reveal it? A story buried. 11 noon the next day, Alyssa emerged from her room. Her face was pale, her lips drawn tight, but her eyes, they were clear, determined. She sat across from me, placed both hands on the table, and said, "You said you were ready to hear it." I nodded. "Then don't interrupt." Alyssa's true past. The confession, her voice was measured. Flat, not angry, not emotional, but hollow, like she had said these words 100 times in her mind. "My name is Briar Wren Green. I was born in Kalispell, Montana. My mother was Evelyn. We moved a lot: Arizona, Oregon, Idaho. She never told me why, but she always looked over her shoulder. When I was 10, I found a lockbox in her closet. It had pictures. One of them was of you. Another was of a man. I think he was your father. There were letters too. I didn't understand them at the time, but they all talked about a deal. Money, silence, something about being left behind. When I asked her, she told me everything. My mouth was dry. What did she say? She said my real father was your father, that Evelyn was pregnant when he left her, that she begged for help, but your family turned their backs. She said he offered her hush money, told her to disappear. She never got over it. She drank, she raged, but she never let me forget who was to blame for the life we had. You, him, the whole family. I shook my head slowly. That's not possible. My father, he wasn't like that. Her eyes narrowed, cold. You don't know everything he did. Memories better. Yuli wanted to defend him, but something inside me cracked, because I remembered Evelyn. I remembered her screaming outside our house one night. I remembered Dad pulling me inside, slamming the door, saying she was crazy. I was 17. I didn't ask questions. I didn't want to. I had buried that memory like it didn't matter. Alyssa's disappearance, she continued. When I was 12, my mother died in a car crash. I was in the back seat. I survived, but I didn't tell anyone who I was. I didn't want to be placed in a system tied to the people who abandoned us. I ran, stayed hidden, moved city to city, taught myself to survive, until I turned 18 and found your name again in the letters. So I came to find you. She looked at me, a final sharpness in her tone. I didn't come for love. I came for answers. My guilt takes shape. I sat there, silent, crushed under the weight of generations of decisions I had no part in but still felt responsible for. What did it mean that the person I had loved like a daughter came to me not for healing but to uncover wounds I hadn't even known I'd caused? Why didn't you tell me sooner? I asked softly. Alyssa's expression softened, just slightly, because I didn't know if you were like him. I needed to see for myself. Tensions rose after her confession. The air in our home changed. We still lived under the same roof, still shared meals, still watched bad TV in silence. But now it all felt like performance. She was Briar now, not Alyssa, and I couldn't know that. Worse, I couldn't unfeel the guilt. I began combing through old records, emails, digging for truth. I even called my aunt in Salem, someone who had been close to Dad back in the 90s. She confirmed the affair, confirmed the pregnancy. She begged him to take responsibility. She said he paid her off to make it go away. I dropped the phone at an attempt at reconciliation on evening. I knocked on Briar's door. I spoke to someone. I said, "It's true. What happened to you? What happened to your mom? It shouldn't have." She didn't reply. I didn't know. I whispered, "But I want to do right by you. Not out of guilt, out of love." Slowly, she opened the door. Her face was unreadable. "I didn't come here looking for a mother," she said, "but I might have found something close." The burn box. Next day, she handed me something wrapped in a scarf, a wooden box weathered, with initials carved in the corner. "For example, I've never opened it," she said. "It was my mom's. She said to give it to the man who ruined us. But he's dead. So, I guess that's you now." Inside, a series of letters addressed to my father, all returned unopened. A birth certificate with my father listed as unknown. A locket with a photo of Evelyn on one side and baby Briar on the other. And at the bottom an envelope addressed to me, dated 6 months before Evelyn's death. I opened it. "To the daughter of the man who broke me. You don't know me, but I know you. I've watched your life from afar, wondering if you'd be different, if you'd have mercy in your heart, if you'd care for a child the way no one cared for mine. Maybe one day she'll find you. Maybe one day you'll be her mother in the way I could never be. And maybe, just maybe, we can both find peace in that." Some truths are like splinters, tiny, invisible, irritating. Others are more like teeth, sharp, buried deep, capable of shredding everything in their path when they finally surface. This truth had been growing for decades, and now it was here, exposed, bleeding, demanding a reckoning. The day after the letter, after reading Evelyn's letter, I sat alone in the kitchen for hours. The locket lay open on the table, catching the afternoon sun. I turned it over and over in my hand, trying to match the faces inside to the pain I now understood too late. I wanted to hate my father. I wanted to hate myself for not asking more questions when I was younger. I wanted to undo everything, but the only person who seemed completely calm about it all was Briar. Briar's boundary-ish avoided emotional conversations. Since the day she revealed her identity, she'd kept a cool distance. Not angry, not hateful, just calculated. Like this was the final part of a long chess game and she was waiting to see how I'd play my pieces. "You don't owe me anything," she said one night. "But I do," I replied. "Not because of him, because of you." She shook her head. "No, you're not responsible for his sins, but you are responsible for what you do now." The breaking point: we had our first real fight a week later. It started small about her skipping her college orientation, but it escalated. "You don't get to act like my mother now," she snapped. "Then stop calling this your home." I fired back. The words hit harder than I expected. Silence bloomed between us like smoke. She stood, trembling, fists clenched. I came here because I wanted to know if people like you could be better than people like him. But now I can't even tell where he ends and you begin." I couldn't speak. I had never felt so much like a stranger in my own skin. Unpacking Evelyn's paint hat night, I revisited the letters Evelyn had written. They weren't just angry. They were desperate. I begged him. "I begged your family. No one wanted her. They said it would ruin your father's career. That we were a mistake. But she was just a child. Our child. If you ever find this, I want you to know I tried. But I broke. And when I broke her too. It wasn't just a story of abandonment. It was one of inherited pain. And now Briar was carrying it. An unexpected visitor next day. I received an unexpected visit from my Aunt Valerie, the only relative who hadn't disowned me when I adopted Briar. "I heard from a friend you've been asking questions about your dad," she said. "Thought I should bring this to you." She handed me a small manila folder. Inside, an old paternity test never filed listing my father as 99.6% likely to be Briar's father. A restraining order Evelyn filed in 2006. A photo of Evelyn outside our childhood home. She looked like a ghost who had clawed her way out of hell. Valerie watched my hands shake as I read. "I tried to tell your mom," she said, "but she wouldn't hear it." No one wanted that kind of scandal back then. A new kind of conversation. I didn't tell Briar about the folder right away. I waited for the right moment. It came late one evening, when she quietly sat beside me, on the porch, knees drawn to her chest, eyes tired. I used to think if I could just get someone to say it out loud that he did it, that someone knew, I'd feel better. "Did it help?" I asked. She shook her head. "It just made me feel emptier." I reached into the drawer beside me and handed her the folder. She read it in silence. Then again, her hands trembled. "I'm sorry," I whispered. For all of it, tears welled in her eyes. But she didn't cry. "I hated you. You know," she said softly, "even after you took me in. I thought you were pretending." "Maybe I was," I said, pretending it could just be normal. Pretending I hadn't been complicit by ignoring the signs. She looked at me for a long time. "You stopped pretending now." Shared scars after that, something changed. We began talking, really talking. Not about school or groceries or weather, but about trauma, survival, identity. She told me about foster homes, shelters, nights and truck stops. She told me about panic attacks, about Evelyn's rage, about how love to her always came with danger. And I told her about my silence, my cowardice, my regrets. It didn't erase anything, but it started building something. Brick by brutal brick. A letter to the dead in mourning. I found her at the kitchen table writing. She handed me the paper when she finished. To Evelyn. The letter began, "I forgive you. I don't know if I should, but I do. You were broken and alone, and you did what you could. But I'm done carrying your pain like it's my inheritance. I'm not a secret anymore. I'm not his shame. I'm not your revenge. I'm me, and I'm still here." I cried when I read it. She didn't. A year had passed. The weight of secrets no longer suffocated our house. The silence that once pressed between us had been replaced not with constant joy, not with perfect peace, but with something more real, understanding. Briar was still learning how to exist in a world that hadn't always been kind to her. I was still learning how to parent a child who had raised herself through fire. But we were doing it together. A new kind of homebriar had enrolled in college full-time psychology. Of all things, she said she wanted to help other girls like her, girls who didn't get rescued, girls who carried too much pain in too small a body. "I don't want to fix anyone," she told me once. "I just want to be the person I needed back then." She came home on weekends, left sticky notes on the fridge, laughed a little more, cried a little less. There were still bad nights, ones where the past showed up uninvited, but we didn't hide them anymore. A visit to the past on rainy weekend. We drove to Kalispell, back to the town she was born in, back to where Evelyn was buried. It wasn't some dramatic pilgrimage, just a quiet reckoning. Briar stood over her mother's grave in silence for a long time. Then she knelt down and placed a small folded paper at the base of the stone. When I asked what it said, she replied, "Goodbye." We never spoke of it again. The final revelation there weeks later, while cleaning out old boxes in the attic. I found something odd. A stack of letters, sealed and hidden in a book of my father's. I recognized Evelyn's handwriting instantly, but one letter stood out. It was addressed not to my father, not to Evelyn. It was dated 3 months before Briar was born. If you ever find this, and if you ever look at her the way a mother should, then I need you to know this. She's yours too, not by blood, but by design. I chose you, even when I hated you, even when I wanted you to feel the pain I felt. I knew one day you'd be the one to save her. I just wish I'd been able to do it myself. Letting go of the blame, handed the letter to Briar without a word. She read it slowly. Her hands didn't shake this time. She just nodded once, quietly, like a missing puzzle piece had finally clicked into place. Later that night, she whispered, maybe she wasn't trying to destroy me. Maybe she was just too broken to know how to love me. I didn't have an answer, but I held her hand. And for the first time, she let me. A new name. A new beginning. Briar legally changed her last name not to mine, but to Green Walker, honoring both her mother's truth and her own rebirth. I'm not erasing her, she said. I'm just rewriting the ending. She had started writing a memoir. She let me read the first page. I was born into silence, raised in the shadows of broken people. But I found my way out not with a map, but with a mirror. And when I looked into that mirror, I saw not who I was supposed to be, but who I could become. Epilogue. The smallest thing sometimes, on quiet mornings, I find her curled up on the couch, reading, sipping coffee with too much sugar. We argue about music. We share playlists. She steals my socks. I lecture her about rent. She rolls her eyes, and yet every mundane moment feels like a miracle, because I know how easily we could have missed each other, because I know that she didn't just come into my life. She chose it, and in choosing it, she gave both of us a second chance.